with this kind of trappings that go along with this feudal system. Along with the role of feudal lord, there is a concern for succession. And we've seen in our own society how there's been a question after Srila Prabhupada's departure, how succession goes on. There has been controversy over this issue. All of this is related to this role of feudal lordship. And finally, with feudal lordship comes something which we don't often speak of explicitly, but it's there, and that is the exertion of power. That we have the notion someone is in a higher position, sort of giving an order, you do like this. This spirit has shifted, I hope, to a considerable degree from what it was in the time soon after Srila Prabhupada's departure. But nonetheless, that role is sometimes there, simply because power has to be dealt with. Where there is power has to be recognized and acknowledged and dealt with in various ways. Okay, the third of these roles, which I find to be most, I would say in many respects, most important in our tradition, as emphasized by Srila Prabhupada, and that is teacher. In traditional understanding in India, the first role as teacher for the guru is the imparting of mantra. This is especially associated, of course, with Diksha. But as Jiva Goswami explains, Diksha is actually about becoming freed from material existence, ksha, and becoming imbued with transcendent knowledge. So it's not just the giving of a mantra. There are also two kinds of teaching beyond giving a mantra. One is non-verbal teaching, just by how one acts, what one does not say, perhaps, in a certain situation, how one behaves in relation to others. This is something which we are all learning from the Guru. We observe the Guru. How does he, and I want to be gender equal here, how does he or she act in all different situations? And then, obviously, the very important side of teaching is verbal teaching. And the verbal teaching is very closely associated with, and we might say, a reaffirming of Scripture, of Shastra. So many times Srila Prabhupada would say, I am simply repeating what I have heard from my Guru and from Shastra. What does that mean, simply repeating, we may ask. And I would say this applies to the next two categories, namely Guru as preserver of tradition and as renewer of tradition. If we think about preserving tradition, we're thinking about, well, keeping what's there, keeping a heritage, keeping something which consists of a lot of things, including customs. You know, how do we perform the different temple rituals? These are often customary more than they are written instructions. But there's also literature. There is, as Srila Prabhupada so much emphasized, there is Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and what he called the law book of ISKCON, the Nectar of Devotion, especially the first 19 chapters, giving details of how to practice. So that literature, to preserve that, to maintain it, is the business of the Guru to a large extent. Also to preserve what institution there is. In our case, Srila Prabhupada established the institution he called the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, despite advice given him to make it the International Society for God Consciousness. He said, no, we know who is God. His name is Krishna, so we're calling it Krishna Consciousness. So that society, Srila Prabhupada requested, one of his requests just before he departed was that devotees cooperate in order to carry on the mission, the institution which he had established. I would just make the additional point here that we are the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. We are not the International Society for ISKCON Consciousness. Some devotees seem to think that we should become simply ISKCON conscious. Actually, though, Srila Prabhupada's mission was that we be Krishna conscious. And to do that, he perceived ISKCON as the means, as instrumental for that purpose. Then, another element of preservation of tradition is to protect the tradition against threats. Every spiritual tradition, and I can say this from my study of religion, from whatever source it is, wherever it's located, is contested. And that includes our own, believe it or not. So many different aspects of our tradition are contested. There's so many aspects of our tradition which are contested within our tradition. One might say there's nothing that's not contested within our tradition. So one of the roles of the Guru is to protect against the threats which are there. But that's not all, and I would say fortunately that's not all. Seems like people are coming and going.
Yes.
Maybe just connections. I don't think somebody
Okay.
disconnected
Yeah.
on purpose.
Oh,
No.
I'll just put it.
Yes.
Anyway, we will continue.
Yeah.
Anyway, they saw that we are here for some time. They can be Okay, fortunately, there's also renewal of tradition. And actually, tradition is not something just of the past. Renewal is a redefinition from day to day, week to month to year. Tradition has to be renewed, otherwise it becomes something that you can go and look at in a museum. It becomes archaic. If it's not lived tradition, then it's not tradition anymore. It's just a dead. It's something for a history book. And that means there has to be renewal. And too many devotees, I feel, don't understand this. Just yesterday I was happy to read on the ISKCON News website that devotees in Villa Vrindavan have been quite active in interfaith dialogue, and they're finding that this is helping their temple very much to bring people together. So it was a very nice article, and it was describing how they have learned over time to do this in a very effective way. But then there were comments, and in the comments some devotees were writing really nasty things. I was shocked.
Wow.
Yeah, I was amazed to see that some devotees cannot understand that for tradition to survive and thrive, there needs to be renewal. And when there's renewal, that involves innovation. There has to be finding of new ways in order to connect people and connect people to the tradition and help them to appreciate it. So that's one of the roles of the guru. It means also creating. It means being sometimes inventive. We see that Srila Prabhupada did this. When he brought his mission to America, the typical example is that he allowed ladies to become brahmacharinis. This was something new for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And he used so many media in ways that had never been done before. Innovation was there. And now we look at it and we say, this is wonderful. Without these innovations, where would we be? Then some devotees will say, yes, but that was Srila Prabhupada. He was qualified, he was the pure devotee, he can do that, but who are you to make some innovation? You are not qualified. Well, Hare Krishna. I would say the time factor will determine in this respect, but I would say that this is a role and actually a duty. If the tradition continues, there has to be different sorts of innovation. Then the last two have to do with relation to God. After all, we understand, and this is emphasized by Krishnadas Kaviraj in the beginning of Chaitanya Charitamrita, that the Guru is a kind of representative of God. And when devotees were told this by Srila Prabhupada in their very beginning in New York, some of them were shocked that the Guru is to be worshipped as God. They confused. They thought that maybe Prabhupada was saying that he was God. He clarified, he said, no. But as representative, then some proper respect is there. But in this category of mediation between God and humans, what does this mean? We understand, as again Krishnadas Kaviraj explains, there are actually two gurus. There's the guru in the heart, and there's the external guru. And they work in cooperation to uplift us, to teach us, to illuminate us, and to connect us. And this is the point being made here. Mediation means connection with the Lord, who is otherwise inaccessible. The Lord is accessible. He is Solabhya. He is everywhere. And yet, our access to Him, for that access, we take help. As we take help from the external Guru, we learn how to take help, how to access the Lord in the heart. But we never say, okay, now I've learned everything from you that I have to learn. Thank you very much. Goodbye. I don't need you anymore. That is the understanding of impersonalists, that the Guru brings you to realization and then goodbye Guru. No, mediation is always there, and one example of this from Chaitanya Charitamrita is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. When he goes to Gaya, ostensibly to offer Shraddha for his father, his deceased father, who does he meet there? He meets Ishvara Puri, whom he had met once before in Navadvip. Now he meets again, and at this time he takes shelter of him as his guru. By doing this, he is, of course, teaching us, but he's also showing that even the Supreme Personality of Godhead if we accept Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, what does he do with respect to Guru? He accepts also the Guru. So mediation is there. This, by the way, does not mean that we don't have also a direct connection to the Lord. Srila Prabhupada said, when we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we are directly connecting with the Lord. Why? Because the name and the Lord are non-different. So we chant Krishna's names, we are serving directly. When we serve the deity in the temple, we're actually serving Krishna directly. But only with the blessings, only with the authorization, only with the good wishes of the Guru. Otherwise, we can think that we are serving, but Krishna may not be accepting the service. And then finally, in Srila Prabhu's list, the Guru is, as a role, serving as a manifestation of divinity. When I think of this, I understand I don't fit here. But what I found is an interesting, shall we say, phenomenon, namely that again and again devotees ask me for blessings, different kinds of blessings. So one thing I've learned to do is this. Also Abhaya Mudra. There's also this, which is giving benedictions. Giving blessings is there. Giving darshana, we understand one has darshana of the Guru as one does of the Lord. And also receiving worship. This is one of the roles of the Guru. Something that we haven't tried yet, but is mentioned in some of the descriptions of some of the previous Gurus, particularly Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that is, at the end of life, entering into a deity. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is said to have entered into the Tota Gopinath deity. Right? That's one version. There are different versions, different deities. Yes, and also different versions. Anyway, how he left. And then another function within this role is spiritualizing material things. So something is offered to the Guru, especially food, and then that is accepted, and then that is considered as, in some way or another, spiritualized or purified in general. So those are the 7 roles, but as I said, as I see it, there is another category, another role which deserves to have its own category, and that is servant. Jivar Swarupa Hoy Krishna Nityadas Tatastha Shakti Hoy Veda Veda Prakash. That all of us are eternally servants, whether we like it or not. This is a foundational presupposition of our philosophy, that this is our identity. But alas, what do? We forget that we are servant, and we try to become, in so many ways, master. When we see that this is not working, then we start to think, maybe I should work on plan B, and plan B is I should learn to become a servant, not just of anyone, but of the Supreme Lord. And the wonderful thing about our tradition is that the Supreme Lord himself appears as the perfect servant. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna appears as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to be in the mood of the perfect servants. Nityananda Prabhu, as his close companion, is also in that mood of being servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Advaitacharya, although he is understood to be none other than Mahavishnu or Shiva, or both. His mood is he wants to be a servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they want to be servants of their gurus, servants of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in this way, servant of Krishna. Obvious point, and yet something we have sometimes forgotten. Sometimes those who have been in a position of guru have even been led to forget their position as servant. And this has led to quite some problems occasionally in the short history of our ISKCON society. Some devotees have unfortunately suffered by this. When a guru took on too much the role of being feudal lord, and the disciple thought, I am a servant to this master, my guru, and the master guru forgot perhaps that he is first and foremost a servant and is teaching to be a servant, then disasters have happened. And devotees have been unfortunately hurt by that. Devotees have sometimes suffered being exploited under such understanding. And I have to say, or I want to say, even though one might not say this in this occasion of Vyasa Puja, but I still want to take opportunity to apologize for two devotees who may have in the past suffered in such misunderstanding. In one way or another, I have been, I know, a party to some misunderstandings of the balancing of the roles. I hope that as I get older, I'm becoming a little more mature, so that I can understand how to act in which role, which emphasis has to be there to help devotees in their progress, as we say, back home, back to Godhead. It's a very, very delicate thing, actually. Taking up spiritual life and entrusting oneself to the guidance of another is extremely, extremely fragile. It involves investing so much trust in someone. And when that trust, for one reason or another, gets a little rusty, or worse, if it gets broken, if it gets fractured, then to repair that becomes very difficult. Sometimes I have seen, more than once, my own role as guru gets mixed up in a way which I don't at all like, with mistreatment of devotees within the greater society of devotees, the institution. I find myself in a position where I want to defend the institution, at the same time I want to change the institution, to seeing that devotees are not being properly cared for. So sometimes one, in the different roles of guru, is in a sort of quandary. Well, I won't go on much more, but maybe to think about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his different roles. Starting from the very beginning, according to Krishnadas Kaviraj and his other biographers, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was already teaching from the very first days of his appearance. He would teach by crying. All he had to do was cry, 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 and immediately this would get the devotees chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, to get this little baby to stop crying. I don't know if that works with other babies, but it seems to have worked for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he was already from babyhood teaching to remember Krishna. He was a teacher to the very proud scholar Keshava Kashmiri of the Nimbarka Sampradaya, apparently Nimbarkas. He taught him humility simply by outdoing him in his learning and making him think about how this could possibly have happened to him, and then to realize, aha, this could only be this Supreme Lord who has met my mat. So he was teaching him humility, and of course we have the teaching enshrined in the 8 verses of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Shikshastakam. Trinadapi sunichena Taror Ivan Sahishana Amanina Manadena Kirtanya Sadahari. So Keshava Kashmiri was very fortunate to get this instruction. I already mentioned his accepting Ishvarapuri as guru, and in this way he taught being a perfect disciple. We may not be able to imitate Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this respect. It seems that as soon as he received the mantra from his guru, he became overwhelmed with ecstasy, so much so that he was worried. Is there something wrong with me? No, you're doing fine. Keep going. It's described in Chaitanya Bhagavata that as the Vaishnavas in Nadia were being threatened to stop their kirtan, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reassured them. He told Srivas Thakur in particular not to worry, everything will be okay. And so he taught fearlessness. Srila Prabhupada also taught his devotees fearlessness. In the very beginning in New York, the idea came to go out and chant on the streets, and the devotees were, how to do such a thing? Prabhupada said, come on, let's go. And when they did, they were so happy and felt so empowered